Um, I was getting pains in my abdomen, and they've been going on for possibly, I would say, a year, maybe 2 years on and off. Basically, he had a feel of my abdomen, and he said, "I don't want you to panic, but I want you to go to hospital now." But when I went in, I could tell something, wasn't right with the way the doctors were.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Toughest Finish Line podcast with me, Jen Doan. I hope you're doing okay. I myself am getting closer to my next toughest finish line of the Ironman World Championships in Kona. I finally hit taper time and I can't quite believe it's next week. I'm definitely going to be taking motivation from all the speakers we've had on the Toughest Finish Line podcast. If you have enjoyed our episodes, then please do like, rate and subscribe, as it really does help. This week's guest has been through what's labelled as the mother of all surgeries, and his comeback from the surgery is truly impressive. So this inspirational man's Instagram tagline is Deadman to Ironman, which I think gives a bit of insight into his story. But welcome to the podcast, Paul Smith. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. Now, we've had a number of people on the podcast who have had challenges throughout their lives from birth, so things like multiple sclerosis and autism. But you were completely healthy, weren't you? And then something quite extreme happened out of the blue with your appendix. So shall we start there with what happened initially?
Sure. I was 43, pretty healthy, to be honest. Probably, I like doing outdoors, hiking, walking, surfing a bit. Did a couple of half marathons. That sort of sets the scene really for where I was fitness wise. I wasn't anything like a
Right.
super athlete. And I was getting pains in my abdomen, basically, down the right hand side. And they've been going on, well, for possibly, I would say, a year, maybe 2 years on and off. And this is part of my story. Why I tell my story is because, you need to get people to, especially men, to go to the doctors, if they're not well. Because I was unwell for quite a long time. And so it kind of reached a point where the periods of being well in between the unwell bits were getting less and less. And terrible cramps and pains and night sweats and things, all sorts. So I took myself to the doctor, and basically he had a feel of my abdomen, and he said, "I don't want you to panic, but I want you to go to hospital now." So I'm like, okay.
Oh, God.
So off I went. So he sent me home, and I had to go back, pick up a letter, like a referral. He said, "You don't have to read it. Don't worry. It might not be, I don't want to worry you, but take this letter with you to the hospital." So within 2 hours, I was sat in the radiology, and had a scan, and there was a mass on my appendix. Um,
Right.
Basically, they did some blood tests at the same time, and they admitted me straight away into A&E and into hospital. And I wound up in hospital for a week. And it was my
Oh,
appendix.
goodness.
It was a grumbling appendix, you'd probably call it, people would say. So it was infected, and it was on the edge of bursting. So I was in the process of having blood poisoning. So I had to be admitted for a week with really strong antibiotics, um, just to bring it under control. They didn't want to operate because they said it would be too dangerous. So to cut a long story short, I had my antibiotics. I went away, went back a month later, and it was sore again. And they admitted me again that day, and they took my appendix out. Basically, yeah, my appendix had burst, and it was in a bad way. So had my appendix out, and I felt just so much better after that. It was like just like anybody that would have anything like that, poisoning them slowly over, a year or two. I just suddenly felt much, much better.
My goodness. So had you not, because obviously people talk about a burst appendix and things of quite extreme pain and things like that. Had you not felt it burst? Or
I don't know, it hadn't got to the point where it burst. That was the point.
right.
Because, and and sort of a spoiler for the next little bit of the story, really. Um, when my appendix was taken out, it was sent off for histology, and there was cancer in it.
Mm,
And it was basically the
right.
cancer which had enclosed the appendix and a tumour there that had kept it grumbling, if you like, as opposed to that acute
Oh, wow.
appendicitis that you might know about, you know. So
Yeah.
it was the incident of that that led to the appendix cancer. But of course, you know, by that point my appendix had been taken out. So surely I was, you know, that was it. But
Yeah.
I went back after the appendix was taken out just for a consultation, basically, and I just assumed that it was going to be just to see how my scars were, ask me if I was feeling all right. I was feeling brilliant by that point, and send me on my way. But when I went in, I could tell something, you know, wasn't right with the way the doctors were, and they told me that they'd sent the histology away and it had come back as cancer, as an
Gosh.
appendix cancer. Um, but they couldn't tell me any more at that stage. That was all they could tell me.
Oh,
Um,
wow. How did you respond to that? Like, how can you respond, really? I guess all manner of thoughts go through your mind at that point, but what
well,
did you
absolutely.
do?
I mean, as soon as you hear the word cancer, you think, well, how long have I got? You know, is this, what does this mean? You know, because you know, cancer, we all know it goes from sort of very small, low in impact to up to death within a couple of months, you know. So I had none of them questions answered when I asked them. And they said there'd be more tests and they'd be sent away. So then I had this kind of purgatory really for about a month where I didn't know what was happening. And I was going back to my local hospital for to see like a consultant. And then suddenly out of the blue, I was referred to a specialist unit at Basingstoke at the North Hampshire Hospital for a disease called pseudomyxoma peritonei. And I'd never heard of that, you know, and nobody has really. It's a disease which affects about 2 in a million people generally. And
Wow.
what it was, the bottom line was my appendix had burst and the cancer had come out and had spread around the outside of my organs in my abdomen. And that's how that cancer develops. Um, so to treat it, they have to do a big surgery called a cytoreductive surgery. And that's basically where they open you up. And basically, I had a scar from the top of my dick, basically to my rib cage, open me right up. And they just look around inside and they have to just cut out everything that has cancer on it. And they, you know, that's
Wow.
kind of, it's looking for a cure, basically. If they take it all out, then you should be cured. If not, you know, they don't really know. And they call the surgery the mother of all surgeries because it's a 10-hour operation where you'll wind up, you know, losing a lot of your sort of internal organs in your bowel.
So, when they opened you up and had a look inside, do you know how far it had spread and what had happened?
Well, I had tumours spread around my abdomen, so I had one in my groin, and I had a few that were peppered around my abdomen. Um, when they do the operation, basically they just have to take away everything that has cancer on it. So I had a large part of my large intestine removed. There's an organ called the omertum, which is like a fatty protection really around the front of your abdomen that was taken away. They do like a peritoneal scrape, which is the skin inside your body. They take all of that away because it sits on there, and
Gosh.
obviously any other you know organs and a bit of my liver as well was removed because it was on there. So and and I had it in reality fairly easy compared to a lot of people. Um, you know, women obviously get it as well, and often they'll have a full hysterectomy, you know, and everything removed,
Mm.
and that can happen, you know, at any age. So it's a really serious, complicated operation. And when the operation's done, when they think they've removed everything, they fill your body up with like a chemotherapy wash, which is
Right.
like at a high temperature. So it's at 43 degrees, I think. So they lay you on an ice sheet so you don't overheat. And they like
Wow.
basically rock you from side to side for an hour and a half while this chemotherapy basically, you know, hopefully gets rid of all of the sort of microscopic bits that they couldn't see. So
Oh my
10 and
goodness.
a half hours, 11 hours later, you know, you come out into intensive care for 24 hours and then you sort of start your recovery from there. So a bit of a
Oh my
whirlwind
God.
ride, really.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
definitely.
And I mean, it's a lot mentally to process and take in for you and for family around you as
Absolutely.
well. I can
Absolutely.
imagine like for family, just how you sit outside an operating theatre waiting for your loved one to come round from it. That's a long, long time.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously there was a kind of couple of months between going back and having tests. How did you keep going? How did that news and that worry affect you, or were you able just to continue and put it to the back of your mind?
It's hard. Um, but I always said to myself that I was never going to feel sorry for myself, and I wasn't dying at that point, so I was going to carry on and do the best that I could do, with what I had. And I knew that I needed to be in the best shape I could be in before I went for my operation. I had the consultation in September of and my operation was in November. So I had a bit of time to to sort of train and do some bits and pieces. And that's where my triathlon journey began, really. Um,
Yeah.
because a friend of mine in work had just done the Mallorca 70.3, and he won't like me for saying it, but he's quite an unlikely triathlete, if I'm honest.
Right.
And he went out and he trained and he did all the work, and he come back and he told us all about it, and it was really inspirational. And it got us talking in work about Ironman and triathlon in general, and whether we could do a full Ironman. What would that be like? It just seemed ridiculous at the time.
Hmm.
His problem was his brother had done two or three full Ironman, so he would only be half an Ironman in the eyes of his brother. So the pressure was on him to, like, go the full distance, really. Um,
Sibling rivalry at its best there.
yeah, absolutely. But that's what sort of sparked it, really. And so I started looking at training programs, like beginner training programs, really. And I did cycle a bit and I did run a bit. So I kind of upped those, and I entered like a 10-mile sort of fell race just before, it was a weekend before I went into hospital, that was. And I just kind of got got into the fitness, really, and started and just started looking at that. And it was a good distraction for me, and I knew that it was doing me good, So that's kind of that's how my coping mechanisms with sport and fitness started to take shape, really, before my operation. But
Yeah, as you say, if you can try that best physical shape, so to help you as much as you can come around and in your recovery, then
yeah,
and also, yeah, as you say, a great distraction from what's actually going on.
absolutely. I'd I decided early on that I was going to do an Ironman. As soon as I had the diagnosis, I kind of thought, well, the world's upside down now, so
Mm.
why not? That was kind of, I could do anything I like, or maybe I can't, who knows? So I obviously Ironman Wales. I looked at the website and I looked at all the Ironman races, and my friend Tom was angling for a nice sunny one abroad with a holiday thrown in. But we were looking, and I just I just thought doing one in the UK was, I don't know, a bit more honest.
Mhm.
Wales obviously one of the toughest, and I was like, if I'm going to do one, why not? You know, so obviously that's mid-September time, um, and my operation was in November. So we went down to Tenby. We had a week on holiday, booked a cottage, cycled some of the course, just did a bit of a
Yeah.
recce, swam in the sea, just had a look around, and then went and watched the race. And
Wow.
honestly, I'd never seen anything like it. I assumed, even at that stage, that Ironman was for elite athletes.
Yeah.
And I looked around at that start line, and especially with everyone in their wetsuits, there's every shape and size there on that start line, all
Yeah.
giving it a go, and brave enough to put themselves up for it and to do it. and I found it really inspirational and quite emotional, actually. I'm getting goosebumps now thinking about it because at the
I
end,
can tell. Yeah.
we stayed right to the finish because I knew that if I was going to do it, then I'd be coming in hero hour right at the end, probably because, after my op, I don't think I could have expected anything more. And to see everybody plodding round and, injuries as well, people with injuries, working with gritted teeth, working through it, probably people that were expecting to have a good time, but were still
Mm.
going, 15 hours in because they were, they got an injury during the day, and it was mad. And the finish was magical. And I thought, you know what, this is it. I'm going to do this is going to be my journey through my cancer. And
Wow.
obviously, the day after the entries open for the following year, and I just got my credit card out and paid for it. And I genuinely, you can say this, it's easy to say, but I genuinely didn't know if I'd be alive after my operation or what sort of state I'd be in. But it didn't really matter at
Mm.
that point because I had a journey. I'd gone,
Yeah.
this is my journey now. This is what's going to get me, you know, back in the world and back fit and into life. So yeah, that's how sort of Ironman came to me really, and triathlon.
I've been wearing Luca's cycling kit for around a year now, and it's genuinely benefited my training so much. Luca is a premium women's cycling wear brand created by women for women. Born from the frustration of ill-fitting gear and the outdated shrink it and pink it approach, Luca is here to set a new standard. For performance, for design, and for women, their pieces are made to move with you. Crafted in Portugal from high performance Italian fabrics, tested by a community of female cyclists, and worn by GB athletes like Sian Rainsley. It's more than cycling wear. It's a movement towards empowerment, confidence, and redefining what women's sportswear should be. I've personally found Luca kit to be unbelievably comfortable, and particularly on those longer rides. But also, it looks amazing and is super functional. It really does motivate me to get out on my bike. As a listener of this podcast, you can use my code ToughestFinishLine to get a little something off your first order at rideluca.com. So it just gave you that focus to help even before surgery. You knew in your mind that's what I'm going to work towards and aim for.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I knew I had 10 months basically from my operation to the start, September the 13th, I think the year I did it. Um, and I know I used Iron Fit was the program I used,
Hmm.
the Just
Yeah.
Finish Iron Fit program, um,
Yeah.
which seemed appropriate for me because it's all level two and it builds up, But it's a 6 month program for Just Finish. So I basically had 3 months to get myself to a point after my operation where I was training 6 days a week, sometimes twice a day with my swim. So, you know, and and some people have asked me before, well, why on earth would you put yourself through something like that? And I think ultimately I needed something in my head that would take
Yeah.
up as much space as the cancer, you know. And I know because I couldn't really swim, I had to teach myself to swim in that 10 months
Oh
as
my
well.
goodness.
It wasn't just a case of just building up and doing it. I was pretty much petrified of the swimming. And I was a kind of 10 meter, across the pool on holiday, breaststroke, with your head out of the water kind of swimmer.
Yeah.
That was it. I could swim to save my life, but not much more than that. So there was all sorts of elements that I had to get to grips with.
Yeah. And so for your family, just want to pick up on their
Mm,
feelings. They've just found out horrific, very scary, worrying news, and then you come to them and say, "I'm going to go and do an Ironman." How did they respond to it all? How did they react when you said that to them?
I think they probably thought I was mad, to be honest, and overreaching. just being over ambitious, and maybe a bit in denial of what was happening
Yeah.
to me. I don't know. But ultimately, everybody was really supportive. And if that's what I wanted to do and I wanted to give it a go, then the
Yeah.
support was there, for me to enable me to go and do it. My wife particularly was brilliant at the time. She was going through so much, and because I didn't want any fuss and I didn't feel sorry for myself and I didn't want any pity and I didn't want why me and all them kind of questions. I didn't like it, but I didn't allow anybody else to go through that either, not around me.
Right.
So there were elements where, on reflection, maybe I could have been a bit more understanding of other people, but I kind of zoned in, to my world and my recovery at the time. So that was
Yeah.
important, and it's what stopped keeping me awake at night worrying about it, really.
Yeah. And you just do what you've got to do to get yourself through that situation at the time, don't you?
Yeah,
And protect
absolutely.
yourself. And yeah, and I know a lot of people, anybody who says, I'm going to do an Ironman, they often get called crazy. I mean, I get called crazy all the time for doing
Yeah.
Ironman events and things. But actually, there's nothing wrong with being crazy if it gets you to where you need to be and it helps you through situations. Then be as crazy as you want to be. It's not a
Yeah,
problem at all. So
absolutely. And you know what? If I didn't make it to the start line, what was lost? I
yeah,
don't know, not a lot, because whatever I did in the meantime, with that as my focus, it was, that would have made a massive difference to me in my recovery. So
yeah,
I couldn't lose really.
no,
Don't You
no.
couldn't ask me that a month before the race, because it gets serious then. Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you've got nothing to lose, but actually everything to gain in terms of helping your recovery and helping you come through a horrific time, really.
absolutely.
And so, coming round from the mother of all surgeries that you had, do you remember your first sensations when you came round and your initial thoughts?
I was in intensive care, and I kind of choked back to life really as they were pulling out the intubation tubes.
Gosh,
And you sort of wake up in the room and you're, I'm alive, and then the pain just sort of washes over you really. Um, after the surgery, you're kept on the life support, unconscious for about 24 hours generally while they observe you, and then they'll bring you round. But I had probably 11 tubes sticking out of me. I had a feeding tube in here. I had an epidural in my spine for the morphine and the pain. I had 5 drains that were draining the chemo that had been in me. I had a catheter, and obviously all of my drips and things like that. So it's like a full body sensation when you wake up. It's really uncomfortable,
mm,
um, and you know the morphine isn't great. It helps. If anybody's taken morphine now, know sort of the sensation is basically it takes the pain and it puts it just over there somewhere, a little bit away. It's still there, but
right,
it's almost like it's not in your body. It's just, and it allows you
yeah,
to rest a bit, but it also comes with hallucinations and things like that.
yeah,
So I was in hospital for about 3 weeks in the end, because I had some complications with my bowel coming back to life. So I was constantly being sick, um, and so that all had to settle before they can let you go home, obviously. I was warned before I went for my operation that I could wind up with a stoma, and like a colostomy bag. The tumor in my groin was next to the femoral nerve, so I could have wound up with like a drop foot. Fortunately, neither of those things happened, but they were all a risk. And the thing with that operation is when you go in, it can be anything from they just sew you back up and send you back out because it's too widespread and they can't do anything for you, to all of those complications, where you're a bit broken when you come out, to be honest.
yeah,
So fortunately, I either of them things didn't happen to me, which gave me basically a base then that I could work on, when I got out of hospital. Um,
Amazing.
my training started as soon as I got out of hospital. Really, I would walk 100 meters up the road, cling on to the neighbour's fence for 10 minutes, and then walk back and lay on the sofa. So that's the sort of that was my base
How soon
way.
after the operation were you doing that?
Straight away. It's funny, in A&E, sorry, in intensive care, they won't let you out of intensive care unless you can stand up out the bed. So, like,
Yeah.
literally within 2 hours of me waking up, they were swinging my legs off the bed, and I was shaky as anything, but I had to kind of stand up on my feet for a few seconds and then lay back down. And
Oh my
the whole
goodness.
thing with rehab now is it is not resting in bed all the time. It's
Hmm.
movement, the physio is all about movement. It's moving scar tissue, and allowing your body to heal without seizing up, really.
Yeah.
And so within a week, you're sort of with the physio, you're walking up and down the corridor in the hospital a little bit, shuffling around with your drip stands, following you. Um, and then when you come out, obviously you're encouraged to continue that. But
Hmm.
you, the first, so I had 3 months, obviously, like I said, when I come out, before I had to start my 6 day a week training program. So I had to sort of build from there, really. Um, so I had a turbo trainer, just a
Hmm.
cheap one, which I'd put in the garage and put my bike on. I had a fairly decent um, a Cannondale Super Six as my bike, which is a fairly decent bike. So I knew that was
Yeah.
going to see me through to the Ironman. So I was quite comfortable with that. And so I stuck it on the turbo, and I would just go out and roll out 20 gentle minutes in the garage, um, and that was after sort of 3 or 4 weeks, really, and just built it from there. I always knew that I would have to train through some pain and
Hmm.
race through some pain. Um, and so I just kind of accepted that, really, and just sort of worked it in. There was a fear of a hernia in the beginning,
Hmm.
so I couldn't go too mad. I could do nothing with my abs, and that sort of haunted me through all of my training, really, because obviously everything endurance is core, isn't it? Keep you up,
Yeah, I was going to
and
say that's
keep you
that's
stable.
that's pretty major. Pretty
Yeah,
major when your abs
uh,
don't work and you're training for an Ironman.
yeah, exactly. So I could just do what I could do, really, and so I did, and then it sort of progressed from there, and then once I started on my training, then that felt good because there was a
Yeah.
lot of small positive steps. Everything that I did was a little bit more than I did the day before. Um, and that was so good for my like mental health, putting the operation behind me and looking forwards instead of looking backwards and feeling sorry for myself.
Yeah.
So, that training program was my absolute godsend. I had my little diary and I used to write little notes about how I was feeling and put like my week's training in it, you know. So it just kept me honest, really, and on track.
And whilst you were starting your training again, were you still waiting for further results from the hospital, from the surgery that they'd done? Were you having further chemo or anything?
I was quite lucky because a lot of people will come out of hospital, and if it's spread to their lymph nodes, then they need systemic chemotherapy to treat that. Um, my lymph nodes were clear, so as it was, I didn't need any further treatment. So it was all about
Wow.
recovery from that big operation. So I did think that, and there was a chance of it, and I did wonder how having to go back for chemotherapy, with just 6 months basically of full training, how that would knock me back every time I had to go for my chemotherapy. But,
Yeah.
again, I was lucky, really, that never manifested itself, and it was all about just building, slowly building up to the milestones that you need.
Yeah. And so, with the training that you were doing then, I mean, you touched on it there that your core muscles are not working the same way that they
No.
were prior to surgery. But were there other side effects that impacted the training? So, was there anything in terms of your stomach and taking on nutrition or anything like that that was affected?
Yeah, absolutely. And even now, if I do anything now with a short, large intestine, so large intestine absorbs a lot of fluids. When you're especially when you're under stress or under pressure, like in a race or a long distance event. So yeah, these are all things that I just had to cope with really. And I remember that I was trying gels and energy drinks and different and real food, quite early on because I just needed to see how I would react, because from time to time when I was out on a run, I would be running into the bushes. Do you know what I mean? So there was a lot of experimenting with nutrition and food, the whole time. The key was really
Yeah.
just building up what I was eating to just normal portions of anything. It wasn't, I couldn't really think about a specialist diet or anything like that. It was just about trying to get, just regular calories in me during the day, let alone, what I needed, especially as the training progressed, and I was doing more and more. So it was constantly something that I had to be aware of, really.
Did you do that all by yourself, or did you have support from nutritionists and dietitians at all?
No, I just looked at the internet really, and my mantra was, and it still kind of works today, 300 calories an hour, 100 calories every 20
Right.
minutes. Do you know what I mean? And that's a benchmark, isn't it, really? It's the basic benchmark, isn't it, of what your body can absorb. So I tried to
Yeah.
hit those numbers, 100 calories every 20 minutes during an event. Um,
Wow.
but of course, the longer you go, the harder it is. Um, I found actually I moved on to real food quite a lot, especially on the bike.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I had in my special needs bag, I had a cheese and Marmite roll, um,
I love that.
which, and I ate half of it before my mouth stuck together. But it was brilliant, and small
Yeah.
flapjacks and things. That's what got me around the bike, and obviously lots of fluids. Um, I would take two bottles at each station, have an energy drink and a water, and get through those
Mm.
before the next station, and then supplement it with
Yeah.
with real food. Um, but on the
Yeah.
run, it was a different matter, really. It's sort of
Right.
my stomach just gave up after about 10K and just said no more, you know. So
Yeah.
I was running on fumes then, basically to the end. But yeah, I work my own strategies by feel, really. I kind of
Wow.
knew what I needed to hit, to get me around, and just tried my best using different
Yeah.
forms to get there.
Wow. I mean, it's so inspiring. A lot of people, it can be very daunting for doing an Ironman. I think anybody finds it incredibly daunting, but to do it by yourself as well as having to deal with recovery from surgery and how your body adapts to that, it's really, really inspiring. And yeah, it just shows that anybody can do it, really.
And absolutely, I'll always say that. I say that to anybody, if you don't think it's ridiculous, you know, read my book, talk to me, because actually every bit of that race can be broken down, you
Hmm.
know, that each discipline can be broken down and you can work on each bit of that. And then you'll progress on every discipline till eventually you can do an Olympic or you can do a half, or or you can do a full. And
Yeah.
that's my mindset is exactly that really. You can break it down
Yeah.
right from the very beginning and work your way through, till you get where you want to go. Um,
Yeah.
you know, it's not for everybody, of course. But
No.
if you want it, I would wholeheartedly, encourage anybody to do it, because like I said in the beginning, my world had changed. So why not?
Hmm.
And never in a
Yeah.
million years would I have said that before I had cancer. Never. I'd have made a real fuss about it actually. and with one of them people that doubted myself, and was like, oh no,
Yeah.
maybe what? Oh, I've trained a bit and now my Achilles is hurting, so I'm not I'm not gonna do it. And that I was free from all that just to go and do it. And so I did, and I worked to it.
Yeah, and it just changes perspective on things, doesn't it? It helps you see things through a completely different light. And
Mm.
so coming up to race day then, I mean, I can only imagine you standing on that start line. It must have been incredibly emotional for you, for your family, and your friend that you were racing with. How did it feel
Yeah,
standing there at the start?
it was brilliant. For those that know, the start on the beach, North Beach in Tenby it's an amphitheatre. The town turns out in huge numbers. It's unbelievable. The Welsh anthem's playing, um,
Yeah,
and it's absolutely brilliant. You really feel like you're an athlete there, and you're going to do something special. Um, and before the start, before I went to the start, it was all about getting to the start. If I get to that start line, I'll have won. Brilliant.
yeah,
As soon as you get there, it's like, no, 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 come on, you got to finish now. There's nothing's going to matter. You got to finish. And I saw when I went to register the day before, I think yeah, the day before, in the expo tent, everybody was hoovering up, the t-shirts and mugs and things, and I was like, no way, I'm not buying anything because I'd never wear it, or drink out of an Ironman mug if I hadn't finished. So I was saving that for the Monday morning, and and I was really apprehensive of the swim because my swimming was poor. My swim was going to be about an hour and 40. So
right,
comfortably within the cutoff. And I knew I could do it.
yeah,
I'd done the distance a few times. I'd done a few races in preparation. So I'd been bashed around in, mass starts and group races. So I kind of knew what that was about. But obviously the conditions can be anything from, massive waves and swell to dead calm, that time of year in Wales.
yeah,
And the year I did it, it didn't seem too bad, but there was quite a swell, and the tides were pulling. So you're just swimming really slowly at some points, and you think, God, what's going on? I'm not getting anywhere. But it's the effects of the tides. Um, but as soon as I went in the water and got my head down and started swimming, I was actually smiling to myself. I kind of laughed in my head and went like, oh, I'm actually doing this now. This is happening. It's been a whole year thinking about it, and now I'm doing it. And a lot of the apprehension sort of fell away. And I had to fight for my place early on with a few people, won those battles, got round the first buoy, which, everybody's doggy paddling round tight. And I kind of went round the outside, overtook a load of people. And that's just for me, it was magic. And then on the long straight, I got going and then I was into it, and then it just started. And then from that point, the race was kind of happening for me. And I was within myself. I knew what I needed to do. I didn't go mad because I knew I didn't have a lot in me. So I had to just hit the numbers I knew I could hit. So
yeah,
yeah, the start was brilliant. And even better once I'd come out of the water, because once those 2 laps were done, and it was like, well, there's for me that was the biggest fear really. You know,
yeah,
Loads of
yeah,
jellyfish, horrible. But going up them zigzags and into town for the transition, you were well in the race then. Everything, any
yeah,
apprehension you had fell away, and you were concentrating. Right, get in that tent, get my kit, don't mess about, crack on. And then you're doing it,
yeah.
and you can think about that. So yeah, fab.
Yeah, and as you said, you were training pretty much from scratch. You weren't a swimmer, and so getting that part of the race out of the way must have been a
Yeah,
huge, huge sense of relief. And
yeah.
what about the rest of the race then? How did the bike and the run go?
So on the bike, I'd recce'd the course quite a lot before, a few times
Hmm.
actually. I hadn't done the full 112 miles, but I'd done you could break it into 2 loops really, the Wales course. So I'd done the whole course. I kind of knew how quick I could go. and I knew it would take me probably nearly 8 hours. So it
Right.
only gave me 40 minutes before the cutoff, for like a
Yeah.
2 hour swim and transition. Yeah. So basically it gave me 8 hours. Um, 40 minutes isn't long really, is it? It's a couple of punches, you know, and who knows what else. So I just needed to just settle down, not panic, which and I did. I kind of knew which bits I could push a bit harder, where I could get some speed
Hmm.
up, and where it was tough and I needed just to sit back and dig in. And so I kind of rolled round the whole course like that. It was about 20 minutes in actually. There was a guy flagged me over, um,
Right.
and he'd got a puncture, and I lent him my pump because his pump had broken, and stood there doing that. And I thought, fab. And then when we got back on our bikes, he just shump, he'd gone. And I was like, and I know it was me plodding along going, oh my God, how long have I taken out of my race by lending him my pump?
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't do that again, no matter how desperate it is. So it's probably about 10 minutes. But I did come in on the bike in exactly 8 hours. Well, 8 hours and
Wow.
13 seconds or something it was. So I was, well within the cut off as it was anyway. But on the bike, I found, going round when you're a bit slower and you're not just heads down racing, it's really nice. Everybody's really nice. Everybody's in it together. And you do find that. I
Yeah.
did find that actually, which surprised me a little bit. It was the first time I'd experienced that. Was like literally everyone was at the back. We're all in it together. Everybody was really nice. Everyone was willing each other on. Everyone wanted everybody to get round. It wasn't competitive. It was a kind of group event, really. Where everyone was really wanted everybody to do well, and that gave me a big boost actually. And helped when it was tough. There's a lot of climbing on the Wales course. There's a lot of just grinding away slowly,
Yeah.
not helping your average speed, and worrying about it, constantly calculating in your head how long you got left. Um,
Yeah.
yes, but yeah, I really enjoyed it actually. Ultimately,
Hmm.
it all went exactly as I'd wanted it to. Um, and then, if you hit the cut off for the bike, you've actually got quite a long time to do the marathon. You know, but you got to do it. That's the thing. And so you come
Yeah.
off with this like weird euphoria because the worry for me on the bike obviously is like if your chain snaps or you fall
Yeah.
off or you have an accident or something. That's the bit where there's nothing you can do about that. You can't just keep
Hmm.
walking. Um, and once you're off the bike and free of the bike, it's all on you then. It's just you and your legs and getting it done.
Yeah.
You know and the relief coming out of transition onto the marathon was massive. It's only a marathon. I've only got a marathon to go. Come on, let's do
Only
it.
a marathon. Yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, isn't it? Really. And so of course I started running, and then I just realised how crushingly tired I was. Straight away,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh my God. And you just want to walk straight away. I just wanted to walk, and I was like, no, you've got to run at least half of it to get round. You can't, you might have a lot of time, but you've still got to run the majority of it. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, so off I went, and it took me a good 20 minutes, half hour just to get into a stride where I could just
Yeah.
and get my head right mentally because I just didn't want it. Every step was painful and horrible, and I just wanted to stop running.
Yeah.
And it took ages, for me to get over that and into some sort
Yeah.
of groove, really. And then each aid station then was like a mini oasis. I got to the first one and had a sip of flat Coke, and it was just like nectar. And it was like, oh
Yeah.
my God, that is the best thing ever. Doing on horrible gels and things all day, and then you taste that, and it's just like, wow. And then off you trot,
Yeah. Who
to the
knew
next
that
one.
flat Coke could do so much?
Yeah,
It's
brilliant.
just amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Until the third lap when it was coming out in fountains. And
Oh.
that's the point when it was really tough, and then there was quite a lot of walking then. I still tried to, and
Mm.
then it started off where I was running most of it, and there's a lot of hills on Tenby, and then you sort of start walking the hills, running the flats, running downhill, And then you
Hmm.
get sort of towards the third lap, and I started walking on the flats and running down the hill, and it just, the attrition of it just kept coming and coming. But
Yeah.
as you get further into it and you know that you've got the time, you can relax a bit and then just kind of do what you need to do. And that's all I could do anyway, in the condition I was
Yeah.
in. And like I say, we said earlier about the fact that my abs I really didn't have any. So my back was absolutely killing me, and the whole thing then was just getting it done, making it
Yeah.
happen. But the
Just
crowds were
fine.
brilliant again. Everybody really encouraging, and it just gets you through it.
Yeah. So how was it coming down that finish line? I mean, an Ironman finish line is one of the most incredible places as it is, let alone for you, knowing that in 10 months prior to that, you were
Yeah.
in a very different situation. How was that finish line?
It was euphoric, really, to be honest. The good thing about Tenby at the time, a lot of Ironman races, you kind of, if you're doing laps, you kind of run alongside the finishing line and then you
Yeah.
go off, so you see it all and you see people finishing. The year I did it, you didn't. The whole thing on the Esplanade, you sort of went through an arch in the
Okay.
town, you went left and then round a corner, and the finish line was all there. But then your three laps were to the right, so you didn't see any of the finish until the very
Oh,
end, and you
wow.
come around that corner, and it was all lit up in front of you, with the crowds and the finish line and the red carpet and stuff. So as soon as you were heading towards that, it was absolutely brilliant, and I just felt like just the weight of everything that I'd been through, at the finish line. It was like everything I'd gone through. It was, I'd survived the cancer. I was winning. I'd done the race. Everything I thought I could do, I'd achieved in that moment. You know, and all my
Yeah.
family and friends were there as well. It was just absolutely brilliant. You know,
Oh, amazing. It's just incredible. It gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. It's
yeah,
such an inspiring story for sure, and just shows that even when you are broken and lying on your deathbed as such, you can come back from that and do something incredible within a very short space of time, which you wouldn't have believed. I think a lot of people would find it hard to believe that, but you're proof that it can be done. And
absolutely.
so after the Iron Man, everybody talks about Iron Man blues as it is, that
Mm.
you go, well, where am I going next? What am I doing? Have you continued with the fitness, or how were you after the race?
After the race, I must admit, I didn't do anything for about 3 months. Literally, I'd kind of, I just went, "Phew, that's done." That's glad that's over with. And then I started again and built up. My wife and I actually moved to France, and we were uh,
Oh, wow.
near Geneva and near the Alps. So whereas I wasn't competing, I started climbing and mountaineering and cycling like on the cols, Tour de France cols,
Oh,
and doing
wow.
things like that, for fitness, and it was absolutely brilliant. And then I sort of trained with my wife, who did Ironman Vichy a couple of years after mine,
Wow. Yeah.
which was brilliant to see her do that as well. And then when
Yeah.
we come back, we moved to Pembrokeshire, partly because of the dealings we'd had coming down for the Ironman and stuff, and we moved to the Tenby area, and we still do triathlon now, do local triathlons. I've done the Swansea 70.3 a couple of times as well in the last couple of years. So
Yeah.
yeah, things are still, going on, not at the intensity it was. And
Yeah.
once you've done an Ironman, your mind is sort of different. You're like, oh, it's only a 70.3, it'd be fine. So you kind of take it. It's easy to take it. Take it for granted, and it's still a massive undertaking actually to do that. So I've enjoyed the
Absolutely.
challenge of that, and my swimming has improved, but I'm not a fan of like the cold sea and having to go out because the triathlon season for me really started with the Pembrokeshire triathlon in sort of June, middle of June. So I'm in the sea in May and it's really cold and horrible. So
Yeah.
I I've sort of going to do some more running this year, let myself off the swimming. So this year was the year of the ultra. So the plan was to do we did a Snowdon, they did the Snowdon race, the UTMB 25k, but it was up Snowdon and around,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
done some trail races around here, like coastal races. And I was going to do one in Avon Forest, a 50k, so like my first ultra in December. Um, but I've slipped a disc about
Oh
6 weeks
no.
ago. So I'm like, I've been in agony. I haven't done any
Oh.
running. I still can't do any running. So I'm out walking gently again. So,
Oh.
but again, it feels almost like another reset, because I've been
Yeah.
there and done all that. I kind of reframe everything all the time. So if all I can do is walk to get myself better, then I'm going to go and walk. I'm going to do a bit of yoga, and it's been a godsend really. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, the fitness is still a big part of my life, um, just not at the same intensity, as it was
Yeah.
really. It was
Yeah.
kind of do or die back then,
Yeah.
literally, and it doesn't have that feel anymore. But it
No.
still gives me a lot of energy and a lot of confidence, and it's good for your mental health to challenge yourself, isn't it? And have something like that to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just such an inspiring story. And I do thank you so much for sharing it, because when you have been through something so traumatic, it blows my mind how you still have such a positive outlook on it and you didn't let it drown you, and it just switched your thinking into, well, no, we're going to deal with it and we're going to come through it. And so I know one of the things that you kind of touched on it right at the beginning. You said that you share your story to encourage, particularly men, into listening to their bodies and things.
Yeah.
But we always talk about advice on the toughest finish line about how you've come through things. So have you got some advice that you would share about somebody who might be having symptoms or who might be going through similar to what you went through?
You you need to listen to your body, really. If something's not right and it's prolonged and it's not getting better, you really need to get it checked out. That's all you can say, really. You don't, I I think because it's hard for me to even remember, back how long
Yeah.
it was, but I'm thinking 2 years. I had symptoms that would come and go. I'd feel better, and then oh well, you move on. But I think you just need to listen to your body. You know when things aren't right in yourself, and
Mm-hmm.
if they're not right, then that's the time to get checked out, and to try and find out what's up. Because the longer you leave it, the worse it's going to get for you. It's so important, and I've learned that lesson now, um, and it's one that I would encourage everybody to listen to themselves and be brave as well, because it's easy
Yeah.
to ignore it through fear. But
Yeah.
if you can understand it, you can tackle it, and move on. And that's the most important thing, really, with regards to your health. Yeah. I think as well, as it's an easy cliche to say, but being as fit and healthy as you can be in your
Yeah.
life generally, because I know, although I wasn't, horribly unfit, I was a little bit overweight before I was diagnosed. I was sort of drifting a little bit. And if you are of poor health, that mountain that you've got to climb when you're hit with a diagnosis out of the blue, because it's invariably going to be out of the blue, it's going to make it really difficult. So, whatever it is for you, whatever you like to do, if you like to go for a walk or anything like that, just, go and do it. It's fresh air, really. Just, take in the air and do something to make yourself feel fitter and healthier, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Life is too short and does have the unexpected things come along. So just be ready for anything that comes your way. And you are an
Absolutely.
example of how, even if something horrific and the worst case scenario does come along, you can still get through that and go and do amazing things. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much, Paul, for sharing your story, and hopefully, we can get people listening to their bodies more and going and getting support if it's needed. And I know you mentioned it earlier, but you've written a book, haven't you, about your story? Do you want to share what that book is and how people can find out more about your story?
Yeah, sure. The book's called Deadman to Ironman. It's available everywhere. You can order it in any bookshop, but obviously online retailers like Amazon are probably the best place to go and look. Um, it's been out for a couple of years, so there's always copies to pick up. Um, the book tells my story that we've talked about here, but there's a lot more in there as well about what it means to have a cancer diagnosis, and and how you can, how I sort of manage that, mentally and physically, really. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's for people that have had the disease I've had, but it's for anybody really that's got, or who wants to challenge themselves, or need some inspiration, to do something in their life. And that's the reason why I wrote the book, really. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, so that's available everywhere. Dead Man to Iron Man, and my website is deadmeattoathlete.com. And if anybody wants to chat with me or ask me any questions, then I'm always open to speak to people. I love to speak to people about their own sort of journeys with triathlon, or even coming back from ill health. So yeah,
Yeah.
get in touch. I'm more than happy to speak.
Amazing. Paul, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's so inspiring, and I think a good reminder that even when things do feel like rock bottom, you can keep going and come through things. So thank you
Yeah,
so much for sharing your story today.
Jen, you're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of The Toughest Finish Line. I hope you found it inspiring. If you did, please don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe to help us share this story more. I'll be back in 2 weeks after the Ironman World Championships, where I'm hopefully going to catch up with some of our previous amazing guests like Adrian, Lisa, Holly, Ashley, and Lucia. So have a good week, and I will see you soon.